Leeds United fans can be an incredibly volatile bunch. We know that when it comes to bad news, we kind of flip out a little bit. We probably shouldn't, but it's a habit that we've built over the years. We've come to expect the worst. So when little transfer stories sort of disappear or slow down, we kind of assume that they've just gone. But that isn't always necessarily the case because something has popped up in the Julian Brandt conversation that I think is definitely worth a little bit of a talking about. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. It's going to be a relatively short one because it's 7 minutes past 1 in the morning and I am feeling very, very tired. But we'll have a little bit of a chatter. We'll talk about what's gone on with the Julian Brandt stuff, what it means for the rest of the squad, and ultimately it'll be a good time. Anyway, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Anyway, so Gianluca Di Marzio is one of the more reliable folk in the Italian sort of transfer bubble. Admittedly, Fabrizio Romano is probably the more well-known one, which is sort of obvious. However, Di Marzio tends to be decently in on both agent talk and Serie A talk. However, he seems to have had a little bit of a natter on the Julian Brandt situation, who left Borussia Dortmund on a free transfer and is now sort of hovering around the ether. Specifically, he talked about this story because Juventus and Roma both had a little bit of a sniff around, considered signing him, and it turns out that there's not really been any progress in that area. But this is for a pretty good reason, because in his tweet he stated that Julian Brandt is looking towards the Premier League, in spite of the fact that Juventus and Roma thought about it on a free transfer. If I have a little bit of a look in more detail at the rest of the article, I'll be 1 second. This is taking a moment. It basically says that interest is increasingly far from Germany, is likely not going to go back to the Bundesliga, but the balances of the negotiation have undergone a decisive change of course in the last few hours. Different Premier League clubs, including presumably Leeds United, because we've heard a hell of a lot about how Leeds have an interest in signing Julian Brandt, have started to move in a concrete way, exerting an important pressure to convince the class of 1996. I think that just means that he was born in 96, I'm not entirely sure. At the moment, the top English series represents the most clearly likely destination for Brandt's next career chapter. Now, all of this seems to be very, very promising for Leeds United. We know that when it comes to trying to sign players, when it comes to that sort of battle between clubs for getting your interest across and making it clear that you actively want to sign that player, you're not just looking for a number 10, you're looking for Julian Brandt. Or you're not just looking for a centre-back, you're looking for Muharemovic, and the same applies for Harry Wilson. We're very good at approaching players and getting across the idea that you are the person that we want in our system. Here's everything that we need from you to work well in our system. Here's everything we can provide you. Let's see what we can do. And obviously contracts will have a big part in that. It'll come down to wages and bonuses and all that kind of stuff. But we're very, very, very good at getting those free signings over the line. We're very good at putting ourselves out there and going, look, we really want to sign you. It would be our actual pleasure if you come to Leeds United. Fantastic, good times. And that seems to be the case of what's happening with Julian Brandt at the moment. There aren't specifics on who the other Premier League sides with an interest are, and that's completely understandable because, again, Di Marzio is going to more focus on the sort of Serie A side of things, so he's not really going to go into detail in the Premier League clubs with an interest in the same way that he did with the Serie A ones. But still, it's good to know that there's clubs in the Premier League are actively making those moves, and the fact that we've just finished the move for Muharemovic means that we can pay a little bit more attention to this move. And let's be honest, in terms of squad balance, this is probably a move that we could do with, because a lot of conversation has gone on around transitioning into that sort of 4-2-3-1 again. Going back to a style where we're happy to have possession and create chances that way rather than just playing three at the back, hit other sides on the counter. Have a little bit more fluidity, be able to do both of those options. And Julian Brandt is a player that absolutely allows us to do that. I've seen people mention that Harry Wilson is a right winger and a number 10, so he opens up the opportunity to play with three behind a centre forward. Sure, in theory, yes. But who's your winger in that scenario? Because that's Wilson's role. The idea being that if we've signed two players that can play in the 10 in this window, that massively benefits us, and in addition to that, it massively benefits us if we can sign them on a free deal. because this window is getting relatively expensive. Like Muharemovic for 34 million quid is not a very cheap signing. At the same time, you've got Shea Charles potentially coming in for 25. There's conversations around Trafford for about 40. And the numbers start to add up a little bit, and whilst I believe that we are firmly within our budgets and will have the capacity to get various moves done, getting this one done on a free would free up even more budget to go in various different places and make us a little bit more flexible and make us more able to make moves for players across the pitch that we want, as opposed to just going, this is another £20 million that we need to pump into a number 10. That way we can reallocate funds, another extra £5 million for a goalkeeper, extra £5 million for a left back. It means that we can increase the quality across the side. And that's ultimately what this window is. This transfer window this season is about raising the floor of the squad. Because at the moment, there's some players that didn't particularly get in the Championship at points. And we're not expecting them to do the same in the Premier League now. Instead, what we're expecting to do is say, right, okay, you excellent servant to the club, but off you go, and we'll get in a replacement that's better, and we'll therefore raise the floor of every one of those positions. And the ceiling players, such as a Noah Okafor, for example, the players that are better than the average, but like the better players in the squad, that can still improve at the same time. But it's a case of, if our base level player is significantly better than they were last season, hopefully, and this is very much hopefully because there's far from a guarantee that we can do this, we can leave the relegation battle completely behind us this season. It's not something we'll have to even think about. Like Hull are in the Premier League at the moment. They're not going to realistically survive or put up too much of a fight. They might surprise someone, sure, that'd be brilliant. But I personally don't see it. The same applies for Coventry. I think Frank Lampard does alright when he's got a very, very good squad available to him. But compared to the Premier League, he doesn't. And then you've got to consider Ipswich, who aren't looking particularly healthy at the moment. So it's looking like that sort of relegation fight is hopefully something that we will put a little bit of a gap between us and that. And the way that we do that is improve the quality of the squad overall, as opposed to getting a couple of players in positions that we already know that we desperately need. Yes, sure, that improves those positions, but someone like a Brandt means that we can improve absolutely everywhere on the pitch and ultimately look like we are in a far, far better situation. If we were to sign Brandt, that would be an absolute coup alongside Wilson, and that front line transforms from what it was last season. A lot of creativity in the form of Brandt. Wilson's finishing we know is absolutely excellent. Okafor out on the left we know was a game changer last season anyway. Add the wing-backs to that attacking structure and it's already looking absolutely incredible. But then Calvert-Lewin, when he's on form, spectacular. I think we've been handed a hell of a boost in the hunt for Julian Brandt, and hopefully we are one of those teams that is chasing him down from the Premier League, and ideally we're the ones that sign him, but who knows. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below, whether or not we'll sign him. Sorry, I was aiming to do a shorter video, but I just sort of ended up blabbing for about 8.5, approaching 9 minutes, so I didn't mean to, but that's fine. Anyway, I'll leave that there. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you all later. Toodaloo.